We're almost there. Second. Okay, Humam, thank you for taking the time to
Of
present.
course, it's my pleasure.
Go ahead, please.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the presentation about Change Management Bootcamp. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Muhammad Imam Al Zaim. I am a first-year master's student in the Biomedical Engineering Department in Istanbul Medical University and Sydney University. Today, we'll be taking the time to have a small, high-level change management bootcamp presentation to kind of understand what change management is all about, how can you get involved, and how change management can help you boost and start your career in a proper manner. So we mentioned that the main learning objectives for change management is, and we'll kind of quickly go through them again. It's important to understand what change management is and how it really affects a business and a person. At the same time, what are the different types of change management methodologies and how you can create a change management plan. So once you've had a change management plan, how can you affect that? How can you manage that change effectively? And finally, after it's been implemented, how can you reinforce this change to ensure that it doesn't, let's say, revert back to how we were before that change? So we'll briefly go over the introduction and why change management. So a lot of people mention that, okay, change is always happening around us, but it's not happening directly to me. And it's important to note here that change, either direct or indirect, will almost always have a specific effect on you as an individual and on you as an organization. So we obviously live in times of great change. A lot of things are happening around us. And for an organization to survive and also be able to thrive, it needs to have a, let's say, a method or a system or some kind of, let's say, methodology to manage large and complex changes at increasingly rapid rates. So some organizations unfortunately decide to leave the project success up to fate. They're like, okay, there's no need for us to manage any kind of change in that project, and the people in charge of it will handle it, and it's all going to be fine. Uh, we're going to be talking about why that is not true and why that should not be the case. So in general, what change management is basically a discipline or a study of how you can prepare, equip, and support individuals to successfully adopt change in order to reach an organizational success. So for an organization, an entire organization, to be able to be part of a change, each and every single person working in that organization needs to successfully adopt that change. How can they do that? This is what change management is. How can they ensure that every individual is happy with the change and they want to be part of the change? Is what change management is all about. That's what we'll be talking about today in general. So we were mentioning here that change management is both a process and a competency. So we're not only saying that, okay, change management is these 10 steps, do them and you manage change. That is not true at all. Change management follows a set of repeatable processes and uses a holistic set of tools to drive a successful change. So obviously, when you want to write any kind of document, you would boot up Microsoft Word. So you have these skills, but you also have the tool. The tool is the Microsoft Word in this example, but you also need to have the skills to be able to write. And that's where change management can be understood as some type of competency. So for a leader or for a person who is a, let's say, a change management practitioner, they need to have the set of skills that enables them to utilize these tools effectively. Not only on, let's say, the team's level, but also on the entire organizational level. So we want to increase the organizational effectiveness in handling the change and in it being a quick one at that. So obviously change management that works to, let me just put this one here. Okay. It increases the likelihood of success. And what we're trying to say here is that change management basically helps us to understand at an individual level what kind of things, or let's say aspects, there's 10 main aspects that we'll be going through. How can these initiatives impact the following aspects? So let's say a person is going through some kind of change in their job role. Change in management will help us to ensure that that specific individual will go through all of these changes and be happy at that, or let's say have a overall better understanding of what will be happening. So parts of these little aspects that we'll be going through are the sorry, are the processes that will change. So let's say a person was doing task A and B, now they're doing tasks C and D instead. Let's say they're working on system A, now they're working on a new system. They'll be utilizing different tools. They'll have some changes on their job roles. There's a locational change, there's some kind of compensational change. The way that that individual has their performance reviewed might also be subject to change. That person is, let's say, now reporting to another person, and the kind of mindsets that they are working with needs to also be changed. So all of these 10 aspects are very important for a specific individual working, so you and me in the future, and how you can manage these little little aspects as you try to move your team to a new future state is very important. So let's say a new person was doing task A and B, like we said, and you want to make sure that that person knows for a fact that they will start to work on tasks C and D. So it's important to have some sort of clarity here. And let's move on towards a question. So this question basically tells us that, have you ever been asked to make a change when you did not know why a change is needed? And how did that make you feel? This was a poll that was asked previously on a much larger scale conference. And most of the people who voted were like, okay, yes, that happened to us before. And the way it made us feel was this. They felt very frustrated. They felt very disconnected. They felt that they kind of wanted to resist the change that's happening. They felt some kind of anger. There was some kind of inconsistency. And overall, they were dissatisfied and they were feeling unmotivated. So imagine, for example, today, someone just tells you, okay, you've been studying your entire life, done, you're stopped. You're not going to study anymore. Or let's say you have been doing a certain thing in a specific way for the past, let's say, 10 years, and now someone told you, no, stop, that's wrong, you should do it another way. You will be feeling these kind of things, and that is why change is hard. Obviously, change is hard, and what we're trying to do with change management is to ease it on our organizational people, individuals, and also make it more effective and efficient for us to change something in an organization. So we want to stop feeling what we mentioned here, and we want to start making our individuals feel this. So change management derives the positive outcomes. It kind of has a speedy returns on investments. It has some kind of positivity. It has some kind of benefits. It's successful. You can kind of start to see the results realized in front of you. And overall, this is way more positive when you try to manage the change that your organization is going through. And so the why, what, and how of change management. So why do you want to change? That is the, let's say, the reason and the rationale behind some kind of change. So let's say, why do we need to change? Let's say we have a very old system here. It's been 30 years since we've changed the system and it's becoming very slow. So that is why. Okay, that is number one. What are we trying to change? So what exactly needs to be changed and what are the specific outcomes that we were hoping for? So let's say we're trying to change our system and we hope to get, let's say, a faster system or a more efficient one or something to make our lives easier. And then we go to the how. So this is the specific region where we start to discuss the strategies, the plans, and the actions required to implement the new system that we mentioned and how we can manage that change. So obviously, you don't want to just in one night turn off the old system and turn on the new system and leave all the individuals in our organization to just get used to it. So that would cause more harm than if you kept using the old system. Pretty obvious. So how can you actually do that? So now we look at also another poll of a structured change methodology that's implemented on specific projects and their specific success rates. So in a project that had, let's say, a proper structured change methodology, and it also had a budget and a schedule, with the proper change management effectiveness, it showed us an almost 81% of an increase that we have met our objectives. We have not exceeded our schedule. We have not exceeded our budget. So obviously, it's very costly for an organization to go over budget or to move outside the bounds of this project's timeline. And in fact, the structured change management approach was the second overall contributor to project successes in 2016. So imagine how important that is with me. And then we start to look at how it applies to any kind of business change that impacts how employees would do their job. So let's think of a business process design. They want to change that. Let's say an organization wants to expand itself, or let's say it wants to downsize itself. Any kind of change that would impact how a specific employee would do their job, you can apply change management. Another example is digital transformation. Let's say the organization wants to go through digital transformation. It's a step into the future, but it's not an easy step to actually implement and ensure that every individual wants to be part of that change. So these are all some examples where business change could impact the employees and how can they do their jobs. Some real world examples are, for example, in the field of oil and gas, the replacing of existing internet, and let's say they're trying to create a new kind of workflow, or they try to upgrade their system. They want to utilize Office 365, SharePoint. They want to have a new kind of process design, and they want to, let's say, acquire a new organization. So they want to expand the organization by acquisition, and they kind of have some kind of changes that impact specific customers. So these are just real world examples where change management would kind of ease and ensure that everything runs smoothly as the change management life cycle goes through. And we will be talking about that. But first, let's listen to this quote by Vince Lombardi, who said he's a very famous American football coach. He, I think, led the New York Giants for multiple victories throughout the years. And he said that the achievements of an organization are the results of the combined efforts of each individual. So that tells us that if Apple wanted to do a change, for Apple to completely do that change, each and every individual must be part of that change. And their efforts are the ones that would move the entirety of Apple towards that change. So far, so good. So now we're going to be talking about the 5 main tenets of change management. We'll be mentioning what these are, and we'll be also going through different types of change management methodologies. We mostly focus on the pro-site change methodology in this presentation, but since this is a short one, I'll briefly mention multiple types of change management methodologies and how yourself can get more into that. So for the 5 tenets of change management, we obviously change for a reason. For a change to happen, we need to have individual change. That's point number 2. And the outcome of that certain change is the collective result of each individual change. So far, so good, correct? And also, change management on its own is a framework that enables us to manage the people side of change. So you have 2 main sides of the change: the technical side of the change, let's say a new system implementation, and the people side of the change, where you ensure that your individuals in the organization are being part of that change. Let's say they're getting training on the new system, they're getting used to work on the new methodology. And finally, we apply change management to realize the benefits and the desired outcomes of the change. So we change the system for a reason, and after we're done with the change management process, we reach that objective, or we have found that goal to be actually done. And now we talk about what we've been mentioning since the beginning. Let's talk about the top 3 squares for now. So the organization is in the red zone right now, which is the current state. The transitional period is where an organization starts to do the change, and the future state is after they've reached their objectives. Okay? So if an organization wants to move to the future state, it requires each and every individual to move from their own current stage through their own transitional period towards their own future state. Let's give a small example. If a company wants to move to a new location, or actually if the company wants to use a new CRM system, a relationship manager system, they currently have some kind of system. They want to, let's say, move all of their data to the new system. So that would be happening in the transitional period. And now that they've reached the future state, they've moved to the new system, they need to make sure that everyone is also moving in with them. So this certain, let's say, individual in the company wants to start to move their data through the transitional period towards the future state. So he has some kind of data that he's working on the CRM, and now he moved it to the new part in the new CRM. That's basically how change is done. But there is almost always some kind of people that get lost during this transition. So in the current state, everyone's together. Through the transitional period, some people fail to be part of that change. And so when you reach the future, you're kind of left with a Swiss cheese looking kind of square. And this basically tells you that, okay, some of the people, so let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people could not be part of that change. They failed to transition properly to the new CRM system. And that is what we are trying to minimize. We need to ensure that all of our individuals are part of the change and they want to, let's say, they want to change with the organization. They agree with the change that's happening, so they want to adopt it and be part of it. So to reach a unified value proposition, we obviously mentioned the people side and we mentioned the technical side. So the technical side is where our project managers are working on the technical side of that project. The timeline, the budget, what it needs, what kind of new system are we trying to implement? That is the main, let's say, focus of our project managers, and our change management practitioners are mostly focused on the people side of the change. So we'll talk about how all of these, the project managers and the change management practitioners, they all kind of link together and work together in a bit. But it's important here to understand how the design, development, and deliverables, along with the ability to embrace, adopt, and use the new system, are all what would boil down to have a successful result outcome from our project. So for us to move our individuals from the current state towards the transitional rate, towards the future state, you need to have the technical side and the people side working together to ensure the best kind of possible outcome. And now we move to talk about how we how the connection between our change management practitioners and our project management practitioners work together. So this is known as the ProSci change triangle, and we'll be talking about what it is, but this is specified for the ProSci change management methodology. We'll be talking about different methodologies as well. So over here, we're saying that the project managers and the change managers, along with the leadership or the sponsorship are, let's say, the higher management level, the senior managers, the people who decide that, okay, this organization needs some kind of change. All these three people work together to reach a finalized success rate. So you have PMOs, they work on the technical side. The change management people, they work on the people side. The leadership and the sponsorship are what would tell the PMOs and the CMOs what the change needs to be. Together, they work and they reach our most important thing, which is the success. So the PCT provides context and an organizing framework. So obviously you would have different types of PCT, but that's a bit of more in detail. So we'll not get into that too much. Another important part of the ProSci change management is the 5 building blocks of successful change. They're also known as the ADKAR. So we have 5 main points, very important. The first one is awareness. So you need to understand that your individuals understand why the change is happening. So let's say you're in charge of a team. Your team needs to know why the change is happening. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is regarding desire. You need to also create the sense of desiration and the personal motivation in your team to be part of the change, so that at an individual level, let's say I'm working in that team and my change practitioner told me that, okay, this is the reasons for change and what do you think of it? In that way, I would kind of feel that, yes, I like this change. I want to be part of it. So now I have also desire. That's point number 2. Point number 3 talks about knowledge. So the importance of having the information and the skills necessary to implement the change successfully. So this is pretty self-explanatory. If you want to go through a change, you need to know what the change is. You need to have the important skills to be able to be part of the change. You need to know them, that is. And that's where we go towards the second last point, which is the ability. So now that I have the awareness, now that I have the desire, now that I have the knowledge, I also need some kind of training provided by my organization to be able to be part of that change. So any kind of necessary resources and the support from my, let's say, superiors would all need to be happening towards me so that I can have the ability to, let's say, work on the new system or have a proper ability to be part of the change. And finally, reinforcement. So let's say that now we've moved towards a new system. I need to stay on the new system. And how you can do that is by reinforcement. So you can kind of have some kind of rewarding system for people who are working on the new system very hard, or some kind of, let's say, ongoing support groups that happen every week to talk about the new system and how everyone is being able to cope and work with it. These are the main building blocks in the pro-site change methodologies. And the really nice thing about these points, guys, is that they are applicable even on an individual level. So that is why we've chosen to create our presentation mostly on the pro-site change methodology, because not only it applies on an entire organizational level, but it's also applicable on a personal level. So that is something that I find really interesting about it, and it is really worth a read if you have the time. Now we'll move towards different types of change management methodologies, now that we've understood the general premise of what change management is. So uh, to sum up, before we go to the different methodologies, you have an idea, you want to change, okay? You want to change something, and you need to reach your goal. So the process of moving from what you had as an idea towards your final goal is where change management would happen. That is focused on the people side of your organization. All right? So this is the 8-step change model by John Cotter. And in this methodology, we'll also talk about the ProSci one later, but in this methodology, the first step is to create urgency. So we're understanding little by little what the change should be. So I'm creating an urgency to know that a change is required. We then create a coalition or a team, and then we develop a vision and a strategy. So our vision is to create a new system, blah, blah. We need to have a new kind of department implemented in our company and all that kind of stuff. So now what they're doing is creating the overall climate for change. So the organization is starting to see that, okay, there is a change that needs to happen, and this is the strategy for it, and this is our vision. We then start to reach the vision towards the rest of the organization. So we're communicating to people about it. And now we start to empower action. So we've done enough talking. Let's do the actual work, walk the talk. Then they start to get smaller and smaller wins. Let's say we've started to implement the first part of our new system. Good job, guys. You need to keep the motivation level high so that you keep your organization engaging and enabling for the whole organization. And then you start to leverage the wins to drive change. So you remember when we did that system implementation, we got a lot of happiness out of it. Everybody was happy with it. So we got a win and people were happy. So maybe we need to do it again. So we need to implement the change and we need to also sustain it. So we kind of embed the change idea or the idea to change, that says it in a more higher level, into the culture of the entire organization in such a way that our organization is happy to be part of multiple changes and not just one. And then once you reach the 8th step, you start to create urgency back to step number 1, where you find something else that needs to be changed and start creating a new team, new vision, and go forth with it. Another change model by Virginia Satir is as we see here, it's kind of a graph, and it's basically a graph comparing the performance with the time. So let's say at point number 1, we have the late status quo. This is the amount of performance that we have. And then we directly start to implement the change. So we will most definitely be facing some kind of resistance, which is point number 2 here. So our performance would start to decrease, and that's where we reach the chaos region. So in the chaos region, there's a new system. Nobody is used to it. There's no training about it. And there's just a very big kind of drop in performance as time passes by until people start to get used to it. So now we're in the integration region. So people are just all right, I'll be part of that change. It's kind of forced on me, but that's okay, which is why I don't specifically like this kind of model. And then finally, you reach the new status quo, which has a higher performance as compared to the first point. I don't really agree with this one, but it's also applicable and it's actually being implemented in different organizations. Another change management methodology is known as the transition model by William Bridges, which basically has three main zones. We have the first zone, which is the dark blue part. Here we're trying to end losing and letting go of our old system. In the neutral zone, what would happen is we're kind of getting, as time passes by, we're kind of letting go of our old system, and at the same time, we're transitioning towards the final region. So in the new beginning, as you can see at the top, it's very small compared to letting go. And as time passes, we start to have a more and more larger area for the new beginning. And this is where our company would move through the letting go and the neutral zone towards the new beginning region. That's basically the whole idea for it. It's not as detailed as the pro-site change management methodology. We will talk about it, but it is applicable in fact. Here we have the switch framework, the Chip and Dan Heath. So in this one, we kind of think of a different way to change. So we have a rider, and we have an elephant, and we have a path. So direct the rider. First of all, a person is riding the elephant. You need to kind of direct them. So what bright spots and what critical moves should be done to point the rider at the point of destination? The point of destination over here is the new change management idea. Let's say our end spot or our destination is the implementation of a new CRM. So now that we've kind of aligned our elephant, we need to motivate the elephant. So you find the feeling that kind of makes the elephant not want to go. So any reason why the elephant is resisting, you need to find that feeling, shrink the feeling, and basically that's done by growing the amount of people who support the idea of doing that specific change. And then you show the path. So what kind of path will we need to take to reach our new system, our desired goal? And then you kind of get more elephants and you basically go. So it's a different kind of take on change management. And it's kind of nice to think about, okay, we have a rider, we have some elephants, but it all boils down to the same idea. You have a destination or you have a goal that you need to reach. You're currently over here. How can you move from this point towards this point, ensuring you have the maximum number of people who support the change that you're doing in the organization? Because if people don't support the organization, you will have resistance, which would ultimately reach to a decrease in the overall productivity and efficiency of your organization. We also have the Lewin's change model that talks about everything in form of ice. So we're currently as a cube right now. Why is the change required? What do we need to change? And what are the benefits? Do we have our leadership support? Who wants this change to happen? Is it the senior management that are telling us, okay, you guys need to create some kind of change, or what is exactly happening? We need to have our buy-in. So by buy-in, we don't actually mean that people are buying, but we mean that people are part of the change. Okay, so I'm betting on this change. I am part of this change. I am desiring to be part of that change. We develop the steps for change. So that is our change management plan. And then we start to do the change. So in this example, we're unfreezing our cube back to water, where in the water state, since it's very smooth and fluid, we can actually do the change. We can communicate, engage, empower, resolve any kind of issues, implement the new system, and then refreeze back to our new and better shape, where we have embedded the change methodology idea in the organizational culture, where we can sustain the change. So now we move to our new system and we will stay there. And you kind of start to understand what was the benefit of actually implementing the system compared to your previous goals. And you finally continue support on the new system and obviously celebrate success. And now we reach the change management methodology of the ProSci section. So it basically goes into three main phases. If you remember the triangle in the middle of the screen, it's the PCT triangle. We have the leadership and support on the top right-hand side, on the top side of the triangle. And on the right corner, we have the change management practitioners. And on the left corner, we have the project managers. So these three main sections or departments in an organization are what will be in charge of driving the change. We have three main phases. We start with the first one, and each of these phases are supported completely by the ADKAR model that we mentioned, which is the awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So in the first phase, what they do is we're trying to define what our success is. We define our change management strategy. What needs to be changed? In this phase, we're working to kind of prepare our organization and our people to be part of the change. So we define the management strategy. We define the change management team. So who will be part of actually ensuring that everyone is part of that change? And we need to develop our sponsorship model. So what is the kind of clarity between our senior management and our CMOs and our PMOs? And what are we willing to do to reach the success criteria? That is all done in the first phase. It's mostly planning and understanding what should be done. And then we move towards the second stage where we manage the change. This is where we start to plan and act, where we track performance of our individuals to ensure that everybody is being part of the change. We need to also adapt some kind of actions. So maybe this person is not getting very used to the new system. Let's give that person more training. This person is doing pretty well. Let me tell that person to help his other friends, stuff like that. So we're trying to implement the system and we're trying to manage the change as we go through the second phase. So we have our change management plans. Maybe something needs to be changed. So that is where it's done. And finally, after we finish with the second phase, is where we reach the phase number 3. So in phase number 3, we're finalizing our change management plan. We collect the feedback from our individuals. We ensure that we have a full square of the future state. If you remember the green one, we don't want to have Swiss cheese again. Collect the feedback, as I mentioned, and understand the gaps that were created. We need to see where we had the most resistance to kind of ensure more resources on that for our later changes. And finally, transfer the ownership from the change management and the project management people towards the leadership and support of the organization. And that's the general idea of the ProSci change management methodology. And now we're almost finalizing. I'm not sure how we're doing on time, so I'll quickly wrap up. We're going to talk quickly about the importance of change management in businesses. So it's important to have some kind of adaptability to external and internal changes. So let's say, for example, when COVID happened, businesses couldn't really adapt to the change of working remotely 100% of the time. So that's a kind of an external factor that they need to focus on. An internal factor is something like, let's say, letting some people go or having new talent join the organization. So the organization must have some kind of adaptability. It would also help the company or organization to have proper risk mitigation. So we need to have smoother transitions from our current state towards our future state. So this will also help us to minimize the amount of risk that we face. Next step is to next point actually is have the productivity effect that it has. So once you have a change management, let's say department or team that works to always create proper change, the overall downtime that you would have as an organization would decrease. So this would also have the positive effect on your productivity. So productivity would overall increase when you're trying to manage the change in a better way. And finally, it would also help in innovation. So a love for the adoption of new ideas. That's where we mentioned that we try to embed the ideology of change management in an organization. So we've done it once, we can do it 10 more times. That's the main premise of having proper change management in. So they're happy to do a new idea. They want to always be innovative. They want to always be the best version that they can be. And that's basically applicable to both a business and on a personal level. But you guys might ask me, we're engineers and we're going to be working as engineers later on. And how can change management help us? Well, change management is also important for engineers. So as engineers, generally, you would be you'll be working in kind of a project. And with proper change management, the continuity of projects would not be disrupted. So we have, for example, 5 projects at the same time, and there's certain teams working on them, but all of these teams would need to move to a new system. So having a proper change management approach would ensure that all of our engineers are still working on the project. They don't have any kind of disruption when the implementation of the new system is happening. So everybody's working happily, everybody is doing their work, and they're not disrupted because they're used to the change. They know how to handle the change that's happening because they're well informed and they want to be part of the change. Quality assurance. So now we have engineering deliverables. So the outcome of the project, we can systematically assess and control the change to understand how we can best minimize the amount of loss that we have in engineering deliverables. That is also a very important section of change management. How we can ensure that some departments are parts of the change, some departments are not in really. So you need to focus more on them. Resource optimization and budget control is where you start to allocate more resources into regions where you need them rather than regions that you don't. So again, the people who aren't being part of the change, as engineers, you can kind of create a system that would allocate more resources for these people, provide them with more training material. For the project side of things, budget control is very important to ensure that you do not exceed it. So let's say implementation of change management would also help us to implement a proper budget control system. This would help us during the project timeline, not to waste too much time, so we don't exceed our project timeline, and not to exceed our budget. So this is where, in the beginning, if you remember, we mentioned the importance of a structured change management methodology. And finally, knowledge management. So if you're working in multiple projects and the project people are not very connected, having proper change management would ensure that important parts of knowledge is not lost. So this would help us ensure that everybody is also benefiting from the kind of change that's happening. Right? I hope that I wasn't too quick, and we're going to finalize with how to get certified and what you should be doing if you're interested in change management. So there's a list of the most notable providers. So the ProSci is the one that we've mentioned at the end, the one with the triangle and the 3 phases. The ADKAR model, that's the ProSci change management. They have a specific certificate for that. There's also the Association of Change Management Professionals. There's the APMG International, the PMI Institute. So they also give project management certifications along with change management certifications. And there's another institute known as the Change Management Institute. And finally, Qatar. So after you find the relevant certification, some of them have different kinds of prerequisites. So you need to find which one suits you best. And basically, after you're done with that, you can start to find some kind of training program, get ready for your exam, ensure that the prerequisites are met. So some of the organizations that I previously mentioned require that you, let's say, had 1 year prior experience in working in an organization before you can actually take the exam. So once you have all these prerequisites sorted out, you can just finalize it with the exam and you would be able to receive your certificate. So that was it.